I was 47 years old when I learned the woman who raised me wasn't my biological mother. The most disturbing part was this: she didn't know either. It happened on a quiet Sunday in late April. I was at my kitchen table in Tennessee, wearing my bathrobe, hair still damp from the shower, coffee going cold. It was one of those calm mornings that feel safe, light in the windows, no plans, nothing urgent. Then my phone buzzed with a notification from a DNA testing site I'd almost forgotten. It said I had a new close family match. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. If a DNA test proved your parents weren't your biological parents, and they didn't know it either, would you want the truth, or would you rather never find out? I used to think the answer was simple. Now I know it isn't. Growing up, I never questioned my life. I was Sarah Mitchell, born April 12, 1975, in a small hospital in eastern Tennessee. People said I had my mother's green eyes, my father's stubbornness. I was the middle child. My older brother Daniel was 2 years ahead of me, and I assumed we shared the same blood and the same beginning. My childhood was ordinary in the best way. We lived in a blue house with white shutters on Maple Street, the kind of neighborhood where people knew each other, but it felt comforting, not invasive. My mother Barbara stayed home until I started school. Later, she worked part-time at the library. She smelled like vanilla and old books. Every Sunday afternoon, she baked chocolate chip cookies, and the whole house filled with that warm smell that makes you feel protected. My father, Tom, worked at the power company. He left before sunrise and came home tired, but he always showed up. He taught me how to ride a bike, running beside me until I stayed upright. He came to every school play, even the one where I froze and forgot my lines. He didn't say I love you constantly, but he was steady, reliable, the kind of man you build your sense of safety around. There were small things I didn't notice until later. People sometimes commented that I didn't look like my mother. Darker hair, darker eyes, different face shape, taller and slimmer while she was shorter and softer. Nobody meant it cruelly. They'd say I must take after someone further back. Genetics are strange, traits skip. People said it like it explained everything. I believe them. One memory keeps replaying now. I was 10 or 11 at a family reunion on my mother's side, cousins running around in a backyard, adults laughing in lawn chairs. My Aunt Helen studied my face with a puzzled look and made a joke about whether my father had been unfaithful. Everyone laughed like it was harmless. But my mother's expression tightened for a second, and she snapped back that I was hers, and it wasn't funny. At the time, I thought she was just protecting me. Now I wonder if a tiny seed of doubt was planted in her mind that day. Not a belief, just a flicker. Something she shoved down and never allowed herself to examine. Because how could she have known? The DNA test started as a joke, basically. My brother gave me the kit as a Christmas gift. He'd taken one himself and thought it would be fun if we compared results. I wanted to see my ethnicity break down. My family always said Irish and German, with a little Scottish somewhere. I mailed in my sample, checked the results weeks later, and shrugged. Mostly Irish and German, some Scandinavian, nothing dramatic. Then months passed, and the site started suggesting distant relatives, a cousin in California, someone in Texas, names that meant nothing. I'd glance and move on. Then came that Sunday morning notification, close family match. I opened it expecting a cousin I'd never met. Instead, I saw the words full sibling. Full sibling meant 50% shared DNA, the same category as Daniel. My hands started shaking so hard I had to put down my coffee before I spilled it. The name on the screen was Melissa Carter, 47, Ohio. I refreshed the page. Nothing changed. I refreshed again. Still the same. The match confidence was nearly absolute. My mind grabbed for explanations. The first one was my father. Maybe he had a child somewhere. Maybe there had been an affair I never knew about. But my father had died 15 years earlier, and the idea of him having a secret like that felt like someone had just cracked a foundation inside my memory. I felt anger for a moment, sharp, surprising. Then sadness. Sadness for this stranger. Sadness for a life I didn't know existed. Then a message appeared, not from Melissa, but from someone linked to her family. It was brief and unsettling. They thought there had been a mistake. Could we talk? I sat there staring at the screen while the coffee cooled and the sunlight shifted across the table. Outside, my neighbor was mowing his lawn. Normal sound, normal day. My life somehow was no longer normal. I agreed to a video call that afternoon. I spent the hours before it in a daze. I changed clothes more than once for no reason. I kept checking my face in the mirror like it mattered. I was about to meet someone who was, on paper, as close to me as my own brother. When the call connected, Melissa appeared first, dark hair pulled back, calm eyes, a cautious, gentle smile that felt familiar in a way I couldn't explain. Standing behind her was an older woman with silver hair and a worried, tense expression. Melissa introduced her as her mother, Linda. There was an awkward silence, like everyone was waiting for the right person to speak first. Linda finally took a breath and said she believed something had happened at the hospital when I was born. Something no one knew, something they'd only uncovered through DNA tests. Then she told me a story that sounded impossible. In 1975, in the same small hospital in eastern Tennessee, 2 baby girls were born within hours of each other. Linda gave birth at 3:47 a.m. My mother gave birth at 6:15 a.m. Same day, same ward, same nursery. And somehow, during the newborn chaos, the babies were switched. Linda explained why she suspected it. She had taken a DNA test first, expecting one heritage and getting another. She expected Italian and Polish, and saw Irish, German, Scandinavian. The relatives that should have appeared didn't show up, only strangers. She thought it was a lab error and tested again on another site. Same result, another test, same. She wondered if she had been adopted. But her older sister remembered their mother being pregnant, remembered visiting the hospital. The timeline didn't make sense. So Linda asked Melissa to test too, thinking it would confirm everything. Melissa didn't match her, not at all, not Linda, not the man she believed was her father. The test said they weren't related. That's when they began digging through records and asking who else was born at that hospital on April 12, 1975. And that search led them to me. It felt like the room tilted. I remember gripping the edge of my desk. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. Linda said the DNA didn't lie. The site flagged me and Melissa as full siblings, which meant one thing. I was the baby Linda should have taken home, and Melissa was the baby my mother should have taken home. I don't remember everything I said after that. I remember my voice sounding thin, like it belonged to someone else. I remember trying to form questions and not knowing which ones mattered most. Melissa told me pieces of her life. She'd always felt a little different. She became a nurse. She had children. Linda described holding a newborn in the hospital and loving her instantly, never suspecting she was holding the wrong baby. And then the call ended. The house was dark by then, and I sat alone listening to crickets outside my window, feeling like I'd stepped out of my own life and couldn't find the way back in. I had one thought, louder than all the others. I have to tell my mother, but how do you tell the woman who raised you, who loved you, who built your whole world, that biology says you aren't hers? I waited until the next day. I drove to the blue house on Maple Street, the same house I grew up in. My mother still lived there alone 15 years after my father died. When I pulled in, I saw her through the kitchen window washing dishes. Same cardigan, same posture, Same familiar movements that made her my mother in every way that mattered. For a moment I almost turned around and left. Then she saw me and waved, face lighting up like it always did, and I knew I had to tell her the truth. She poured coffee like she always did and sat across from me at the kitchen table watching my face. She asked what was wrong. She said I looked pale. I told her I needed to tell her something that sounded impossible, but it was real. I told her I'd checked it multiple times. DNA doesn't lie. Her expression changed fast. Confusion first, then fear. She asked what I meant, what DNA, what was I talking about. So I told her everything, the test, the match, the video call, the two babies born hours apart, the hospital switch. As I spoke, I watched her face move through disbelief into shock. When I finished, there was a silence so heavy it felt physical. Then she cried, not from guilt. She had no reason to feel guilty. She gave birth on April 12, 1975. The hospital placed a baby in her arms. She took that baby home. She loved that baby with everything she had. She wasn't crying because she did something wrong. She was crying because she suddenly understood what had happened. She kept saying, "Oh my God," over and over like her mind couldn't land anywhere else. She spoke in fragments. That poor woman, that poor baby, my baby. She couldn't complete the sentences. I moved around the table and held her. We cried together in the same kitchen where she'd packed my lunches and listened to my teenage worries and baked cookies every Sunday. And I realized something strange. This wasn't erasing our story. It was adding a terrifying chapter to it, but it was still our story. When she could breathe again, she whispered that she had taken someone else's baby home. Somewhere, there was another mother who gave birth to me and never knew. I told her the truth. She didn't know. None of us knew. It wasn't her fault. Then she said something I will never forget. She said she would have loved any child they placed in her arms. She didn't know I wasn't hers. She didn't know her biological daughter wasn't with her. After the tears, questions came. Who was Melissa? Where did she live? Did she have children? What was she like? I told her what I knew. Not much yet. But as I spoke, I saw something shift in my mother's face beneath the grief. Curiosity, a fragile kind of hope. Finally, she said she wanted to meet Melissa, the daughter she gave birth to. She asked if that was possible. I told her I thought it was. Over the next weeks, Melissa and I texted almost every day. It felt careful at first, like building a bridge plank by plank. She told me about Ohio, about a loud house full of laughter, about the man she called Dad who worked at a car factory, about Linda who taught school. She told me she always felt slightly out of place. Different hair, different eyes, different temperament. People joke she must be the mailman's kid, not meaning harm, but the joke always stuck somewhere under her skin. When she was a teenager, she even asked if she was adopted. Linda showed her records, birth certificate, hospital paperwork, nursery photos. Everything looked normal, so Melissa believed it and moved on. Now she was looking at her own children and asking, if I'm not who I thought I was, what does that make all of this? I understood. I felt the same unraveling in myself. Eventually, we reached the moment we couldn't avoid, meeting in person. We chose a neutral place, a small park just over the Kentucky border, halfway between us. I drove in silence with the radio off, thinking about my childhood like it belonged to someone else, thinking about my mother crying, thinking about Linda watching me through a screen, thinking about Melissa, my sister, who was supposed to have been beside me my whole life. I arrived early and sat on a bench near the parking lot, watching the minutes crawl. At 2:58, a blue sedan pulled in. Melissa stepped out, jeans, white t-shirt, dark hair down, taller than I expected. She stood by her car and took a deep breath like she was bracing for impact. I stood up. Our eyes met across the lot. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then we walked toward each other and stopped a few feet apart. She said hi. I said hi. Simple words that felt too small for what was happening. And then something strange and quiet happened. I recognized her, not like a movie. No dramatic wave, just a deep, steady familiarity that made no logical sense. I saw my own gestures in her, the way she held her hands, the way she tilted her head, like looking into a mirror that didn't match perfectly, but still told the truth. We walked the path around the pond and talked. At first it was awkward, then it softened. We compared childhoods, mothers, fathers, habits, fears. We found surprising overlaps, favorite books, the same obscure author, both of us preferring tea in the morning, both of us tapping our fingers in the same rhythm when thinking, both of us hating spicy food in families that loved it. Small details that shouldn't have mattered, but did, because they made the connection real. At one point, she said it makes you wonder how much of us is nature and how much is nurture, because we didn't grow up together. But we still carried the same small patterns. We also talked about the hard part, the grief for a childhood we didn't share, the birthdays and holidays that passed without us knowing each other existed, the strange loss for something we never had. When we finally hugged goodbye, it wasn't awkward, it was real. We both cried. Then we drove home different people, not fixed, not healed, but changed. Over the next months, we introduced our families. The first meeting was the one that scared me most. Barbara and Linda. We met at a cafe in Knoxville. My mother fussed with her hair in the car, nervous like a teenager. She asked what she was supposed to say to the woman who gave birth to her daughter. I told her there wasn't a script. Just be yourself. Linda stood when we walked in. Her hands were trembling. My mother froze for a second, like her feet wouldn't move. Then Linda stepped forward and thanked her, not with bitterness, with gratitude. Thank you for loving her. Thank you for raising her. My mother broke, and Linda broke, and they hugged in the middle of the cafe like two people sharing the same wound from different sides. No anger, no blame. Just grief and gratitude tangled together. They spent hours swapping stories and photographs. My mother showed Linda my kindergarten picture and confessed how tightly I clung to her hand that morning. Linda stared at the photo like it was sacred and whispered she wished she could have seen it. Then Linda showed my mother Melissa's kindergarten photo, the daughter my mother gave birth to. My mother touched the picture like it might disappear, then looked at Melissa and told her she was beautiful. When my brother Daniel met Melissa, he handled it with practical calm. He gave her a hug and said, "I guess you're my sister too." "Welcome to the family," he added. "We're all a little weird. You'll get used to it." And slowly, impossibly, it worked. Thanksgiving came, and both families crowded into my mother's house. 2 tables, too many people, noise, chaos. And somehow it felt right. Not like we were replacing anyone, like we were expanding. About 6 months later, the healthcare system that absorbed the old hospital reached out. Formal letter, request for a meeting. You could feel their fear through the polite language. We met in Nashville. Lawyers, administrators, risk management. Old records spread out like a confession from another era. They explained how it could happen in 1975. Small hospital, understaffed night shift, no modern ID bans, no double-check protocols, a simple human mistake that no one caught because no one was looking for it. They offered a settlement, a lot of money. We declined, not because we didn't deserve it, but because by then blame felt useless. Money wouldn't return the lost years. It wouldn't rewrite childhoods. We were too busy trying to build something that could still be beautiful. When they asked why we weren't angry, Linda answered, "Anger won't give me back the years I lost with her, and it won't give Barbara back the years she lost with Melissa. All we can do now is move forward." A year after that first notification, we rented a beach house in North Carolina, both families together, too many people, wet towels, arguments about dinner, kids running everywhere, chaos, and it was perfect. One evening, Melissa and I walked on the beach at sunset. I asked if she ever wished we'd grown up together. She said sometimes yes. She thinks about what we missed and it hurts. But then she thinks about the life she did have, the parents who raised her, her kids, her brothers, and she doesn't know if she'd trade it, even for the chance to have known me earlier. I told her I felt the same. I love my mother. I love the life I had. Even if it wasn't the life I was supposed to have, it was still mine. Melissa said, maybe this is the best of both worlds. We keep the families who raised us, and we get each other too. And that's the truth I've landed on. Family isn't just DNA. Family is who shows up, who stays, who loves you through ordinary days and unbearable ones. Barbara is my mother because she raised me. Nothing will change that. Linda is family too, not as a replacement, but as an addition. Melissa is my sister, and we are still learning each other, building something late, but real. If you've ever had a moment that changed everything you believed about yourself, I'd love to hear it. Adoption, DNA surprises, hidden family history, anything. Tell me where you're listening from too, because the strangest thing about stories like this is how far they travel and how often they find someone right when they need to. Thank you for listening all the way to the end.